Picture the pitch a landowner gets in the mail. A company wants to lease your back 40 for 25 years, install some panels, and send you a check every year for doing nothing. No cattle to feed, no crops to insure against hail, just sunlight turning into money while you sleep. That pitch isn't a lie. It's just a very small part of a very large story. Behind that friendly envelope sits an industry where a single grid application can take longer than a mortgage, where the fine print of one contract decides whether a project makes money for 25 years or bleeds cash for 25 years, and where some of the most advanced solar plants ever built in America have gone bankrupt not once, but twice. 30 seconds. Subscribe now, because by the end of this, you'll understand why the panels are the least interesting part of owning a solar farm. Start with what a solar farm actually sells. It is not electricity. Electricity is a commodity worth whatever the market says it's worth this afternoon. What a solar farm actually sells is a signed promise, a power purchase agreement, that someone will buy its output at a fixed price for years at a time. Without that promise, a solar farm is just an extremely expensive field. That distinction is the whole business, and almost nobody outside the industry understands it. Before any of that, you need land. And land in solar is not a simple purchase. Most developers lease rather than buy, paying landowners anywhere from $300 to $5,000 per acre per year, depending on proximity to a substation and how much sunlight it gets. A meaningful utility-scale project needs roughly 5 to 10 acres per megawatt of capacity. That sounds manageable until you realize the real fight isn't over price, it's over one word: access. Land 2 miles from a working substation is worth vastly more than land 20 miles away, because every extra mile of new transmission line adds real money and real years to the project. Which brings us to the part of this business that quietly kills more projects than bad weather ever could: the interconnection queue. Before a solar farm can send a single electron into the grid operator has to study whether existing wires and substations can absorb that power without breaking something. As of the most recent federal data, over 2,000 gigawatts of solar, wind, and battery projects are sitting in these queues nationwide, more than double the entire installed capacity of the American power grid. Median wait time from application to actually connecting is now about 5 years, up from under 2 years back in 2008. And here's the number that should terrify anyone who thinks this is easy. Only around 13 to 19% of projects that enter these queues ever reach commercial operation. Most simply die waiting, buried under study fees and delay after delay. You can build the best solar farm in the country and still lose the whole project to a grid operator's paperwork backlog nobody fixed in a decade. Say you clear all of that. Land secured, interconnection approved, construction financed. Now, the entire 25-year outcome of the project rests on one document: the power purchase agreement. This is where the real risk hides, because a PPA is not just a price, it is dozens of buried terms. Is the price fixed, or does it escalate with inflation? Who eats the cost if the utility curtails your output because the grid is oversupplied at midday, which is increasingly common in states with heavy solar penetration, where operators simply order plants to stop producing when there's more sunlight on the grid than the system can absorb? What happens if your buyer's credit rating drops, or the utility simply terminates for cause? Get that fine print wrong, and you can own a fully functioning, fully generating solar farm that still cannot pay its debt, because the one document that was supposed to guarantee revenue for a quarter century turned out to have an exit ramp built into it. Drop into comment prompt mid-flow, for example. If you've ever seen a PPA contract, drop what state you're in below. That is not hypothetical. Look at the Crescent Dunes solar plant in Nevada, a groundbreaking facility using molten salt storage to generate power even after sunset. It signed a 25-year power purchase agreement with Nevada's utility in 2009 before a single heliostat mirror was installed. Then, equipment failures, 4 separate hot salt tank leaks between 2016 and 2023, forced extended shutdowns. In 2019, the utility terminated that 25-year contract for cause. From then on, the plant survived on month-to-month power deals instead of a locked-in offtake. It filed for bankruptcy in 2020, emerged, and filed again in January 2026, carrying about $173 million in secured debt against roughly $600,000 in cash. The panels still worked. The land was still there. What was gone was the one signed piece of paper that made the whole project bankable. If you remember one thing, remember this. The contract is the asset. Everything else is hardware. Here's the part most solar pitches skip entirely. What happens to the panels over time? Every panel loses a small amount of output each year, a process called degradation, typically 0.3 to 0.8% annually depending on quality. Trivial sounding until you run it across a quarter century. A panel at 100% output in year 1 might sit around 85 to 90% by year 25. Meanwhile, most PPAs include a price escalator, often 2 to 3% a year, so revenue per unit rises while production per panel quietly falls. Model that wrong, and your year 20 projections are fiction. Then there's the tax credit clock, and it's happening right now. Under the federal law signed in July 2025, commercial solar projects only keep the full 30% investment tax credit if they begin real construction by July 4th, 2026, or are placed in service by the end of 2027. Miss that window, the credit is gone. For a mid-size project, that credit alone can be worth millions, which is why developers are racing the calendar right now, not the sun. There's one more bill nobody budgets for at the start, and it arrives decades after the ribbon cutting, decommissioning. At the end of a 20 to 25-year lease, someone has to remove the panels, pull the racking out of the ground, and return the land close to its original condition. Many states now require developers to post a decommissioning bond up front, specifically because regulators got tired of chasing bankrupt operators to clean up abandoned fields. That bond can run into the hundreds of thousands of dollars set aside before a single kilowatt hour is ever sold. Put the whole picture together, and the 25-year life of a solar farm looks less like a straight line of steady checks and more like a chain of pressure points, any one of which can snap the economics. Year 0, you're gambling on whether the queue lets you connect at all. Year 1, whether the PPA actually protects you from curtailment. Year 10, watching degradation erode the exact production that contract was priced around. Year 20, setting money aside for a teardown nobody mentions in the brochure. None of these are edge cases. They are the business. So who actually makes real money here? Rarely the person who buys panels expecting passive checks to appear. It's the developer who controls the land and interconnection position early, then sells that shovel-ready project to a utility-scale investor for a premium once the hard part, permits and grid approval, is already done. It's the landowner who negotiates an escalator into their lease instead of a flat rate, so income keeps pace with inflation over 2 decades instead of quietly losing value. And it's whoever locks in a bankable PPA before construction even starts, because that contract, not the hardware, is what banks actually lend against. Want the full spreadsheet breakdown of a real 10-megawatt project, land cost to year 1 revenue? Drop a comment, and I'll build the next video around it. Here's the honest closing truth. A solar farm is not a passive income machine. It is a capital-intensive, permit-heavy, contract-dependent business that happens to use sunlight as its raw material. The panels don't make you money. The land control, the tax credit timing, and the 25-year piece of paper in a filing cabinet do. Get that paper wrong, and you can own a field full of perfectly good technology that still can't pay its bills. If this teardown changed how you see solar investing, hit subscribe, because next time we're pulling apart another asset class that looks passive on the surface and is anything but underneath.